like to call the special meeting of the Board of Trustees to order at this time. It is 6:31 and December 15th, 2014. Just make note that Trustee Cook is not here. I think he had another commitment. Board, I appreciate you getting together at short notice. And we just wanted, let's stand up first and say the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And I want to make a special thank you to Dick Blackman here for our lovely flags and the flag poles and the stones that they're in, and we'll talk more about that later on at another board meeting, but thank you, sir, for doing that. It's very nice. So Board, I just wanted us to get together tonight to clarify a couple of things that have been going on. There were some questions about mill levies and budgets and appropriation of funds, and I just thought it would be good for all of us to be on the same page, our citizens be on the same page. Matt is here to talk with us, what happened, where we're going from here, and all of that. So with that, I'd like to turn this over to Matt.
And I guess I'll start off by saying, as we have questions, as you know, we have questions. They come up, just ask them, and I don't have the answer, I'll be glad to find it. There seems to be a little bit of unrest throughout the town that we are not in compliance with statutes that require adoption of a budget, adoption and certification of a mill levy. So the purpose of tonight is less action-driven and more information-driven, to give the board an idea of where, essentially, what has led up to where we are now, what your options are, and kind of where I would suggest going for the future, and really to stress the status of Green Mountain Falls in the eyes of certainly DOLA and really Northtown. So I will say this has been a learning experience for myself. I know you're town clerk now. I feel much more comfortable going forward for the next budget session. That said, let's take a look at kind of the deadlines. The deadline for adopting a budget is December 31st. The idea behind that being, well, if you're going to spend money on January 1, let's know where the money's coming from and where it's going. So the deadline to adopt a budget is December 31st. And here's another example of your one hand not talking to the other. The deadline to adopt a mill levy is December 15th. So they want you to adopt a mill levy that is based on a budget that really isn't due for 15 days after that. So until the legislator comes around to actually saying you need to adopt your budget either by December 14th and your mill levy by December 15th, or your budget by the 30th and your mill levy by the 31st, there's kind of this gray area. And so recognizing that, the legislator actually has put in quite a few safeguards. And I think the greatest example I can say is, well, what happens if, in the end of November, when typical boards are adopting their budget, you have to actually take every piece of paper you have as town hall and you have to move from one place to another. What happens if you can't meet those deadlines? Well, there's safeguards in there. So the statute for the budget says, well, we'll take 90% of your previous year's budget and just go with that. Well, you don't really want to do that because your budget last year was in the neighborhood of $1.4 million, which 90% of that would be about $1.26 million. When your actual budget that is floating around there to be reviewed on the 30th is somewhere in the neighborhood of $480,000. So if I was a auditor and I saw all of a sudden the state said, oh, well, you guys have $1.2 million to spend. And then I show up and all of a sudden you pass this budget for $480,000. I'm probably going to want to know where that chunk of money went. And the idea is that we don't actually have that. We know we don't have that. Mary has worked extremely diligent to inform you that we don't have anywhere in the neighborhood of 1.2. So we want to avoid the state doing that. So that's the purpose of taking care of adopting your budget on the 30th and reviewing it. Mary has published that. We are all set to go inside of a public notice on adopting your budget. That leaves the question of the mill levy, because the counties want to know, and the reason counties want to know on the 15th what you as the board are setting the mill levy. And I say counties because Green Mountain Falls, of course, is not normal, so we have 2 counties. And really, you guys met, you adopted a resolution that says we want to leave the mill levy the same. We are going to recertify, and I'll present the board with that resolution to recertify the levy after you pass your budget on the 30th. But that resolution right now gave me the opportunity to send both county assessors an email that says we're going to use the safeguard. Because as you know, there's a few things going on in Green Mountains, and we haven't actually gotten to our budget yet, so we're going to miss the 15th cutoff. We're going to go ahead and elect to have the safe fall, which says if you want to go ahead and do nothing, we'll just use last year's mill levy, which is the direction the board went, and allowed me to do that. I can say that I have received confirmation from both county assessors that they have received that email from me, that they are aware, and I believe it was Teller said to wish the board a happy holiday. So they're aware of what's going on. I guess the next hurdle to jump was to say, okay, well, the counties are happy, but what about the state level? So your mayor, your town clerk, Tammy Kanui from your insurance carrier, and I had a conference call that said, here's where we are. What would you suggest? We're obviously not going to be able to comply with the 15th date to have a budget adopted and a mill levy set based on that budget. So what would you suggest? And their suggestion initially was to go ahead and pass the budget tonight. And I said, well, yeah, Dola's saying, go ahead and meet tonight and pass your budget. And I said, well, I think this board would be capable of doing that, but they haven't held their budget hearing, and their budget hearing is actually noticed for the 30th. And so we said, so what is Dola's take on our position right now? Are we at risk of fines? Are we at risk of penalties, interest for doing any of this? What are the town's risks right now? And he said there are none. That's why they put in these safeguards. That's why if you do nothing, we'll adopt it. And that really again goes back to the idea behind the entire safeguard being put in, which are, and there's actually a 1970s case that has stood for this position, which is we don't want to do anything to hamper municipalities and make it so that if they don't do something, that we just fold and close them up. We want to make sure that they have every opportunity to continue to operate, to continue to offer services that they do to their citizens, to continue to make it so that they're going to keep trucking along until they can address these. And the end of all of this budget safeguard and mill levy safeguard is a really nice phrase and section of the statute that says, if we put in these safeguards, they're only there until you tell us they're not there anymore. So if you don't do anything till April 15th, till May, and all of a sudden you adopt a budget and it says, now we've had the chance, we're in a new town hall, or we've finally been able to meet quorum, for whatever reason, that you're not stuck using what the state's put in place. It's just a placeholder. And that's essentially where you are right now, with the absence of the budget. They will use the mill levy from last year. We have called DOLA. It actually on the 15th, knowing that we didn't send them a resolution that says, we passed the budget, here's what we're gonna do. They will actually contact, the counties will contact DOLA, and they'll say, we didn't get a resolution from this, we don't know what to do. This DOLA will send them a notification that says, okay, we're gonna certify that you're gonna use last year's mill levy until we hear otherwise. We've just gone one extra step further and said, hey counties, just so you know, you can send them that, but be aware that shortly after that, you're gonna get something from the town that says, here's our new budget, here's the mill levy we want to use. I know that, as you've seen my absence in the budget workshops, we don't typically get involved in budgeting. Our advice isn't to say, spend $50,000 on public works this year, spend $80,000 here, don't buy that, go ahead and buy this, because that's just not ours. That's policy, that's things that this board, that you have been elected to decide, not us, give you advice on. Typically, the calendars, the calendaring of this falls on the hands of clerks. We have a new clerk, we have a new attorney, we have people who are learning. So I can tell you that Mary and I know the deadlines pretty well now. We know that there are calendars out there to help us. And I do want to add a very specific caveat to that. And that's that sometimes you'll go through your town code and it's been going this way for years and years and years, and all of a sudden someone new comes and looks at it. Even though you had a 30-year experience clerk, there are things that we have looked at that we're going to change this year, that will be changed to comply with your town code. And if that means that this year we do something different, and the board says, you know what, we want to do it the other way, then we're going to do what we should do, which is amend your code to do it how you would like it to do. We've learned posting, we've had all kinds of fun learning experience, or not posting, publishing. So I don't want you to lose faith in your staff. I think that if nothing else, this is a learning experience that we have resources, DOLA being one of them. Some people think DOLA is this big hammer that just pushes little municipalities around, and that's certainly not the case. They were extremely helpful. They were extremely willing to listen to where we were and say, well, you know, this is what we'd like you to do. And without telling us you have to do this. So I'm confident that this board has no problem looking at the budget that Mary spent endless weeks, months on, and the corresponding documents to go ahead and get us right back where we should be. And that really, although there might be some unrest in the town, that it's really kind of smoke rather than actual fire.
So what are our next dates? 30th is the budget meeting.
30th is the budget meeting. So
And at that budget meeting, we have to pass the budget that night.
so Mary's going to make a copy.
Well, and we have to, it was recommended that we repass the mill levy that night, because that has to be in December 31st. The budget, we actually have until January 31st to submit that. That is if, we had any changes that needed to be made on it. But preferably, it should be past the 30th, so we could get that in on the 31st too.
And then that one last piece of that is the appropriation of the funds.
Yeah, so I'm going to lean on Tyler here, but I know for at least the last 2 years, but probably more than that, most of your budget documents have been done by resolution, and that's fine, except that your appropriation of funds, your town code requires to be done by ordinance. So, that just goes to show you that it doesn't really matter if you've been doing this 6 months or 30 years, there's still mistakes to be made. And that's why things such as the budget have these safeguards. Things do come up. Your town hall might have to be moved. You might have 4 board members who are sick and passing something around and they can't meet quorum to act for a month. Like, put you a month behind. Again, the idea behind these statutes, DOLA's enforcement, all of this is to say, we're working with you, we're trying to make it as easy as it can for this town to continue to operate. No, it's not ideal. We would sure have loved to have not had to have a special meeting to do this. It's been properly noticed. I'm confident that you guys can continue to move forward. So
When you say they have to be passed by ordinance, Matt, and we're meeting on the 30th, how is that going to be done?
well, there's wonderful language that says if for the health, safety, or general welfare of the town, people of the town of Green Mountain Falls, this ordinance needs to be passed rather than two readings on a single reading under an emergency ordinance, that you could do so. The expenditure or non-compliance with a state requirement, which could lead you down a road you don't really want to go down, sounds like a pretty good reason to adopt an emergency ordinance. So, although your town code does require two readings of typical ordinances, it allows for emergency ordinances to be passed on a single reading. So I will say that the appropriation of funds that previously had been drafted as a resolution, I'm going to draft as a special emergency ordinance, so that we can be in compliance with that. Now, going forward, if the town would like to change that and say, you know, we kind of like doing it by resolution, we'll change that. But we know that it needs to be done that way, so we're going to do it that way as much as we can. And when I say we're going to do it that way, I don't mean you're going to vote that way. I'm saying we're going to present it that way. So,
Excuse me.
Board, are there any questions?
Will the ordinance be for budget only or budget and mill levy?
so the only required ordinance to be passed is for the appropriation. So your adoption of your budget can be a resolution. Your setting of the mill levy or recertifying the mill levy can be a resolution. But your appropriation of funds, your town code requires it to be an ordinance. So it would be my suggestion that you review it as an ordinance.
So, and those three things, the budget, mill levy, and the appropriations ordinance, will take care of budget for 2015. So, budget 2016, what is the first date that we should look at?
August is when we need to start looking at having our first budget meeting, because October 15th is when we need to put our public hearing on and post it to the website, our proposed budget.
Give me the second date again. August was the first budget meeting, but October?
October 15th.
It's also been suggested that April and late spring is a great time for the board to start to plan and identify goals and objectives, and then that follows in with the budget to allow for those goals and objectives to be achieved.
Meeting with department heads, things like that.
Right. And the other thing that was discovered is, and this is something that the board, you know, certainly has a lot of time to think about. Our public hearing, it is our town ordinance that there be 15 days for a public hearing. And according to DOLA, there is no time limit. We don't have to have, I mean, we can put a public hearing notice in on a Wednesday paper for the public hearing to be that next Thursday, the next day. They require a 24-hour notice is what they said. So, if we didn't have to wait this 15 days, we could have planned that public hearing and gotten in under the 15. So that might be something that you might want to look at, changing.
Yeah, there are three main ordinances that, and one of them you can't really look at for a while, but there are three main ordinances that I would suggest the board do, and I think that as the new year comes, it is a good time to look at them. One of being going back to a single reading. It's on the first reading, and you say, yeah, that looks good, but change paragraph 2 to add this. And then people say, okay, well, we changed that. So now are we on 2 or are we on 1? You're back on 1. So when we bring it again and they say, oh, you know what? We don't like paragraph 3. Can you just change this one little word in there? Again, you're back to 1. So now you've gone a month where you really haven't done anything. And absent emergency circumstances and things like that, it's really slow. And it's really great for big cities and things like that where you might have 15,000 people and there are 14,999 people that can come on one reading, and just that one person that will have that one nugget of knowledge that's going to come to the second reading. Most small municipalities don't do that. It's a requirement of cities to do, of statutory cities. You're a statutory town, so you don't need to do that. Some people seem to think, well, why are we going back to 1? Aren't we going to miss our chance to say anything? No, you're not. What about our options as far as referendum? No, they're the same. It's just after the second reading. Now it's just after the first reading. You should have the same 30 days that you would whether you're reading it twice or once. Another one would be the 15-day notice. That's really very unique. And it's been our experience that towns don't get sued for being aligned with what the state says big cities and other towns are doing. Towns get sued when they say, we're going to do it this way. And then courts tend to make an example out of them and say, just do it the way the legislator said. If the legislator said, read things twice, even in little cities everywhere, I wouldn't be telling you this. But this board wants to look at things and be able to move and balance staff time and posting things twice, reading things twice. You know, it's twice as much work, literally. So one suggestion would be certainly to look at an ordinance that reduces that requirement. The other is the 14-day, 15-day posting before a public hearing requirement. That's not what you need to be doing. I mean, the state requires 24 hours. It seems that your paper goes out Thursday, so your typical hearings are on Tuesday. You put it there, I mean, you're still going to end up with at least 4 or 5 days before you would typically have one. But, you know, this is a good situation when that kind of shot us in the foot. It made it more difficult than it needed to be. And the third one is looking further down the road as far as publishing these requirements to publish the ordinance. And why I say you can't look at that right now, and you have to look at it not in 15 but in 16, is you actually have to put it to a vote of the people to say, do you want us to publish the whole ordinance, or do you just want us to publish the title that describes what it's going to do and then have available for inspection a full text of the ordinance at town hall? That can save on publications costs, on staff time to get that out there. And it makes it a lot easier to have people attend the board meetings if they're interested in this subject at all. So there's things that, there's ordinances that come down. So this learning experience again, learning to publish as your new clerk is pretty vital for moving forward and looking at these new ordinances. Because as you know, we'll need to publish those.
So it's this time next year. The December 15th mill levy is not going to change because that's a Colorado code, correct?
Yeah, in order to increase your mill levy, you have to put it to a vote.
Okay.
So
For what we're going to be recertifying, that date's not going to change.
the hard thing about the mill levy is you're actually certifying it for the 2014 tax year, because taxes are collected every year, which means they're last year's. So you're certifying right now. The state is going to use the 2013 tax mill levy, which is 17.588. Knowing that this board's intent was to keep that the same, both counties know that's what they want to do. Dolan knows that's what they want to do, and all of them know that the statutory scheme says we're going to make sure that we're going to use 2013 or 2014 until they tell us otherwise. So,
So what I'm just doing the timeline. So the 15th, we will need to certify that next year, which means that the budget will need to be passed the first part of December at the
Exactly.
latest.
Typically, they're done at the same meeting. Ideally, you would pass a budget, then you would you would pass a budget, appropriate funds, and then look at a resolution to certify the mill levy
Okay.
in early December. Typically, your first meeting in December.
Bottom line is the mill levy has to be in by the 15th.
Okay.
So we can.
To avoid using a safeguard.
Right. So we can approve the budget anytime prior to that, and then approve the mill levy prior to that. But the deadline for filing is the 15th of December.
Okay.
And so really, if we don't do anything, knowing that the appropriation of funds is an ordinance, that we just realized we've been doing it incorrectly, you won't be able, if we don't change any of these things, how would you be able to even do that? How would you even be able to do that at that meeting?
Well, and that's what I say is one hand's not really talking to another, because the deadline to adopt your budget is the very last day of the year, which makes sense. They don't spend any money until you know what it's doing. And so there is this gray area where you can have nothing passed, but have to move on something else. And that's why there's all these safeguards that say, if you don't do anything, we're gonna put in these just as placeholders. And then we'll wait for you to tell us what to do next. And that's, right now, that's where you sit. That will change drastically by the 30th.
Okay. Trustee Quinn, do you have any questions or anything about?
I don't, that was very informative.
Thank you. I know it was really, when you passed that, I know there were some concerns there, so thank you really for
Well, and
clearing the air.
to make it clear, it's really hard as an attorney to say, okay, well, I talked to the mayor. The mayor said, we're thinking about doing this. And not have something from the whole board of trustees, because I don't work for an individual trustee or the mayor or mayor pro tem, that you guys speak through resolutions, you speak through motions, things like that. So without that meeting, it's actually really hard for me to go to the county and say, this is what they intend to do. So passing that gave us our footwork to say, look, Dola, here's where we are. Here's what they're trying to do. Here's where we're gonna get. We're kind of in this gray area. You recognize it. You don't seem to have a problem with it. If you do, let us know and tell us how you'd like us to fix it. And here they essentially said, you're fine.
So it was ended up being good, which was great. And I want to say, you guys know, when speaking with Dola on the phone with the conference call with Dola and Sarsa, we have a very good relationship with everybody. And so, and they just want to work with us. And so it's really good. I'm very thankful for that, so. Okay, any other questions, Trustee Stevens?
No.
Okay, everybody knows what's going on, I'll take.
So the next meeting is the 30th.
Yes.
Very informative.
What time was that set, the 30th? Was it 6:30?
I
I don't
think it was
remember
6.
for sure. 6.
I think it was 6, but I can check before you
Check,
leave.
6:30, I know it was that, not 7, because we wanted to, earlier we can meet, the better. Okay. Oh, and no meeting tomorrow. Happy holidays. Merry Christmas. So, okay. There are no further questions, any comments?
In the future, will all this stuff be placed on a website so that people who are absentee can see it, because they obviously can't come to City Hall to review it?
That's more of a policy question, and there's kind of a couple of policy questions floating along that are less legal and more policy. So my guess is, I've heard rumblings of changing how things get posted to the website, so
Right.
I don't know.
Can you just go over the legality of, what is the statute on what we post, like with this budget? 'Cause I know there's a lot of talk, things.
So the requirement, there's kind of this bare minimum, and then there's what Read Mountain Falls has done in the past. The bare minimum requirements are that a copy of the budget be open for inspection. So that begs the question of, well, a copy, can I go copy down and take notes? Yeah, usually. Can I go ask the clerk for copies? Well, that's a policy question, because now you're starting to use staff time and town resources, copiers, papers. And so that begs the question, well, can we charge for that? You can recoup some of that, can't always recoup the staff time. So these are policy questions that the board really needs to decide whether they want to continue to bear the costs both in staff time and in material and equipment used to produce copies. I believe, again, I wasn't here for the last budget, which is kind of good and bad at the same time, but it's my understanding that more copies were made of the budget than made now. So the board, again, it's policy. It's not a law. The law requires you to have a copy open for inspection, and it's my understanding we have just that. So.
So it's just definitely something we can look at, John, and for next year and decide what we want to do board with that, you know, so that'll be taken into consideration. Mr. Patron, did you have a question?
I have two questions. First one is, can you give me an illustration of what one of those safeguard placeholders are?
Yeah, one of them is the 90% rule. So it says, you know what, if your town hall has to move and you miss that December 31st deadline, so it's January 1 and you haven't adopted a budget, what are we going to do? Well, there's 1970 case law that has yet to be challenged or argued in anything but that the intent of all of the budget law is to keep municipalities going. So what we're going to do for you, municipality, is yes, we want you to do that. If something happens and you don't do that, we're going to take 90% of your prior year's budget and appropriate that. We're going to do the work for it. Problem with that here is last year you had about a $1.4 million budget, which you built a very expensive, nice town hall. So 90% of that tells you, okay, well, we're going to go ahead and set a budget for you guys at like $1.26 million. Well, that's definitely not the budget that I've seen drafted. So it would be my encouragement for the board not to use that safeguard because then you have a auditor who comes in and says, okay, January 1 you adopted a budget that said you have $1.26 million. And you know, you got around to it in February and adopted a $480,000 budget. Where did all that money go? Were you really just off that much? You know, and there's things to explain, but it's...
Well, I think there's pretty much evidence.
Well, I think so, and that's fine, but Dola said, well, sometimes it can end up with an asterisk in your audit, which he said you would be shocked at how many municipalities actually have these asterisks that say, there's something going on, but we're really not that worried about it. So, it's just another thing that this board is doing to say, we understand we could use that safeguard, we could operate, continue to operate. It'd be really inaccurate for what we had, but we're going to work our hardest to make sure that that doesn't happen. The other is the mill levy that says, you know, if you don't send the county a certification of the mill levy by the 15th, on the 22nd, when the county has to send that information to DOLA, they're going to say, hey, we didn't get anything from the county, what do we do? And or from the city, what do we do? And DOLA's going to tell the county, well, we're going to use last year's, here's what it is, and go ahead and use that until we tell you otherwise. So, those are two safeguards, one of which we're using in a very short period with pretty much everyone that's involved, knowing that that's not our intent, is to use that for the permanent.
Okay, that was one question. The other is the copies of the budget. I assume that the budget that you're going to prefer on the 30th is something that you're proud of and you want the public to embrace. Is that not so? And if that's the case, then why is there only one copy of that? I mean, I understand the wanting to be careful with the town's money and not waste it frivolously, but it would seem to me that if you're if you're wanting people to adopt your budget, then you would make it available to them to peruse at their leisure. And not everybody who is interested can get here before town hall closes, or can leave as late for work so that they can come here when the town hall is open. So it would seem to me that having that published, maybe if it was published in the newspaper, like most of the other communities in the general area do, you could just refer them to the newspaper. I know it's a little more expensive to publish that large document in the newspaper, but at least it's in the newspaper and it's available for anybody to get at any time they want. The other thing is that it would seem to me that if the budget document is only available here during town hall hours and not everybody can get a chance to look at it, then it looks to me that it's something that you're really not that proud of, but you just want to get over with, and you don't want to, and you want to get as the least amount of knowledge there is about that budget, then the easier it's going to be for you to pass on the 30th. So it looks a little fishy when you can only see a copy of the budget here during working hours, when it's a living document that the people are going to have to live with for the whole year. There ought to be more available, and it wouldn't bother me, if there was 10 copies sitting in a box outside on the railing outside or on top of the rock wall. It would do you and the rest of the town a service to have that available for people to see, so that they can wrap their head around it and be comfortable with it, and you don't have to spend 10 or 12 hours here on the 30th going over that budget chapter and verse, because that's likely to happen.
Well, then Mac, I guess I'll say a couple things. One is this board is extremely proud of that budget for a multitude of reasons. But one is that their new town clerk took that project on, got it to them, that the town clerk worked with all of the other departments to arrive at that budget, that we've got it noticed for the hearing correctly. And another just, incentive for people to come and look at that budget is to see what they just spent a ton of money to build. So this year might be exceptionally reasonable to say, if you want to see it, come see the town hall, come see what we're doing here, come meet the new town clerk, come sit and read.
Come pick up a copy of the budget.
Well, and again, and that's policies. I'm not going to really address the policy necessarily, but I'm inclined to certainly support the fact that your town clerk is personable, is willing to answer questions about the budget, is willing to spend time with you guys about the budget, really answer anything she can. And to the extent that, like I say sometimes, is if I don't know the answer, I'll note that you want that and I'll find out. And I may not have it for you right away, but I'll find the answer for you. So there are certainly things that encourage people to come look at the only copy. If that is the only copy in town, it circulates and it encourages people to come here to the new town hall. And then, well, no, it circulates as long as you come here, and I understand. The other is that, it's not a good idea to have a whole lot of draft documents circulating, and that is from the legal standpoint. Because 50 years from now, when I'm not here, and this town clerk's not here, and this board's not seated, and they have a draft budget, and they found something in it that says, hey, this looks like they spent this extra money here. Or they had budgeted that, but all of a sudden they only spent this. Where'd all that money go? What happens when that's all based off a draft? That's why it's really important, and as hurdleless and inconvenient as it may be, is to say, look, this hasn't been passed. We have to give you a copy. We have to make sure that you can come sit down and look at this copy and see what you want. You can make your notes, you can do what you like to make sure that you understand what they're going to be looking at. Because there are that many interested people in this town with exactly what's going on, especially with all the new people we have. That would make it, but guarded so that isn't out there circulating, so that we don't have budget A that's been, here's draft A of it, and we actually end up adopting draft Z of it, and there's 25 other copies that are out there circling around, saying we're gonna spend $80,000 on this, and we actually end up only spending 20. So you put page, the total column for draft Z, and the expenditure column from draft A, and you put those together, and then you go and try to figure it out 20, 30, 50 years from now. It's not going to look the same.
Well, I guess that's probably a great argument. I suppose that's a great argument, although I would say that this may be a draft budget, but it's a final draft. This is the budget that the board intends to pass. I assume that they've all looked at it and they're comfortable with it, and this is the board, this is the document that they're preferring to the residents and expecting the residents to accept. And if that's the case, then it should be out here for people to peruse, to be able to look at, to go take it home and digest. And if there are some serious problems, I'm sure that somebody will bring them up. But rather than spend all night on the 30th going over this document chapter and verse,
Well, it's interesting that you say, there's serious problems that are brought up, because the mentality of some in this town are not necessarily to say, hey, I see you going down this road, and I happen to know that heading that way might not be the way you want to go, and here's why, and here's the reasons that we think maybe you don't want to go that way, and I do support that kind of mentality on the front half, rather than, well, I know that this is a problem, I'm going to look at this document, I'm going to wait until they mess up, and then I'm going to say something. And that mentality, those two mentalities, the absence of the first mentality of we want to help as much as we can, we want to make it clear that, yeah, we actually do know this, and here's what we're trying to help you, rather than we're trying to wait till you screw up and say something. Only then really encourages the board to say, if we only have to do this for policy reasons, because then they will just wait for it, and they'll wait to hammer us, then we're not going to bend over backwards to help it.
well, maybe there's a difference between somebody waiting for you to make a mistake and actually giving you time to get it right.
If the knowledge, I do agree, I think that there are different levels, but there are also those people who choose to say, we know that this is in here. We know that you need to do this way, and not saying something. That, to me, supports a board that says, then we're not going to send stuff out there. People that come in and say, hey, I know that you're brand new at this. I know that you haven't done it. I've sat on the board for 40 years. I've done this. My buddy is a great town clerk in this town, and he was talking about how hard it is to make sure you comply with this deadline, rather than go, hey, I know that this deadline's coming, but I'm not going to tell them. I know that they're doing this wrong, but I'm not going to tell them. Somewhere in between those two is allowing them to get it right. But I don't think that either of the extremes is necessarily the best place to be.
Well, I can understand that. I can understand it. But when you get down to the history of having the budget prepared, and I understand that as a new clerk, I understand it. But the deadlines are pretty clear. We talked about the budget in February and March.
And then you lost the town clerk, your entire public works.
I agree. But you know what? We have 7 people sitting there who are supposedly interested.
Of which
Well, there's only 6
4
today.
Well,
But-
of which 4 have never sat up here before.
Okay,
So-
but again,
We've got some new people.
but if they're really that interested in making sure that things are right, They ought to research it.
Is it
You know
interest or
that,
not?
that Kim Jong-un can find everything that he needs to know about Green Mountain Falls requirements, and it doesn't cost him a dime. And it's 9,000 miles away. What I'm getting at is that if you're really interested, then you find out.
The interest and the knowledge are not necessarily the same.
That
Because you
if
can have
there-
a
if
lot of
there's,
interest.
if there's an interest in having the knowledge, you use it. You go
It
ask
assumes that
them
the
to find
answer
it
is
out.
always there.
The answer to our problems are available
Okay.
online
Mr.
every
Ventura,
day.
Mr. Ventura, thank you for your comments. We need to move on. Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll take Gail and then we're gonna need to.
I just wanted to say on the budget from 2014, the official budget was approximately $434,000. It was not $1.5 million. And on the question of protocol or whatever, Betty, the assistant clerk, left a detailed notebook of policies and procedures. And I was unaware of budget items, and when you look up the minutes for the past 3 years, you can see the protocol right in the minutes.
See, and that's a perfect example of someone who has the knowledge that could easily operate, that could help the town rather than say that. And what I did say was the 90% rule puts a budget of 1.2. So I didn't want to say this board has adopted. I said that's what they're trying to go for. So
Well, the
it
budget wouldn't be 1.2.
It would be.
because-
That's what I'm telling you. It would be. It's called a 90% rule. If the old budget's 1.4, you take 90% of
But
that.
the
If we do
official-
nothing.
The
then-
official old budget was not 1.4.
Okay, well,
We approved
Okay.
the
One more thing, please.
revised budget.
When, in case you don't know, I spent 13 years on the planning commission. I know the devotion it takes. I think your job is 10 times harder than being a planning commissioner. But you guys ran on the platform of transparency, and having one copy of notice that is here for people to look at, that's not total transparency. Putting it on the internet doesn't cost anybody a whole lot of money that I can see. And it gives people the ability to be more informed, and maybe eventually we get more turnout for our meetings where people would start to care and want to give it input. I'm not here to try to find a fault that anybody's made. I'm trying to help out. So I think that's pretty weak transparency to just have copies here for people to read when they could read them on the internet.
And again, we'll look at that.
I hope so.
Yeah, we'll look at that as we move- get through this budget and begin the next time. Okay, board. Any other comments?
Well, I would just like to say that I have no problem if, they want to do it, if it's posted on the website, I have no problem. I mean, I think, if things are gonna jump out at the last minute, they're gonna jump out at the last minute anyways. I don't see any issue with that.
It's available for them to read.
I realize that, but I mean, I hear the
But
comments.
in a limited fashion, that's the problem with
How is it limited?
this afternoon when we came in to talk to you and look at those documents, we weren't allowed to make a copy. You didn't like that I wanted to take pictures. That's limited. That's not getting it out there to the masses. Just as Max said, how many people can actually come and give up their job, the family, and all that stuff, and
Hold
come
on.
in here to your regular
that's
hours?
a question for the board, and that's what I'm trying to explain. I mean, maybe I'm just not doing a good job. That's not a legal question. That's not something that I get to say for you, other than the basics. That, that's not something that I get to decide of, and this is what you have to do to requirement. That's not something that she gets to decide. That's
I
a
understand that.
policy
She's
that
doing
they
her
have
job.
to set. So if she has something that has been, look, this is what we should do, or been told that or directed that if the policy needs to change, it's not through me, it's not through her, that it's a board's decision.
That's
So,
what I'm talking
yeah, I just want to make sure that we're correcting that to correct
about. It was
there.
cordial, and she explained what she had been told, and I totally understand that she had to do her job. That's not where I'm going with this.
So I would support giving the clerk direction to go ahead and make that available on PDF, have it watermarked with a revision and date. inspection from anyone who wants to look at it, if John wants to look at it.
Second that.
Okay. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor of that, vote by saying aye.
It's just a direction, it's not, need a motion.
Do we need a motion?
To your one, and then we'll finish.
Motion? Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay.
Thank you.